Detroit, we need to talk. Because right now, sitting inside the walls of the Meyer Performance Center, there's a football player who signed one of the smartest, cheapest, most team-friendly contracts of the entire Lions offseason, and he might not even make the roster. That is not a joke. That is not clickbait. That is the reality unfolding in front of Lions beat writers. And if you love this team, you need to understand exactly why it's happening, because it tells you something much bigger about who is really winning and losing inside training camp right now. Welcome back to Detroit Scope. Whether you're watching this at 6 in the morning with your coffee or at midnight scrolling through your phone in bed, thank you for being here. This channel is closing in on 1,000 subscribers, and we could not be more grateful for every single one of you who helped us cross 100. If you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, now is the time, because the Lions training camp storylines this season are absolutely wild, and you do not want to miss a single one. Let's start with the name that has Lions Twitter buzzing for all the wrong reasons. Roger McCreary. Rewind to March. The Lions needed corner depth after a chaotic offseason at the position, and general manager Brad Holmes found a bargain. McCreary, a former second-round pick out of Auburn, university record of 35th overall in the 2022 draft, signed a one-year deal worth somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 to $2 million. For a player with his pedigree, that is pocket change in the NFL economy. This is a guy who spent 4 seasons with the Tennessee Titans, then got traded to the Los Angeles Rams last October, where he stepped into their defense and played solid outside corner during their playoff push. He is only 26 years old. He has flashed real, starting caliber ability at multiple points in his career. When Detroit scooped him up for next to nothing, plenty of us called it a shrewd, values-based move by a front office that has made a habit of finding contributors on the cheap. Fast forward to training camp, and the story has taken a hard left turn. Reports out of Allen Park paint a rough picture. McCreary has struggled mightily in coverage since the very first padded practice, and one particular day stood out as arguably his worst yet. He got beaten on a hitch route. Fine, that happens. Even elite corners get beaten on hitch routes sometimes. That's just football. But then, later in the same practice, he got beaten vertically again. And then, to cap it off, he gave up a touchdown in the red zone. 3 separate lowlights in a single day. That is the kind of stretch that gets a coaching staff's attention, especially in a cornerback room the Lions were counting on for stability. Now here's where it gets interesting, and where you have to think like a scout instead of just a fan watching highlights. The players who beat McCreary during those reps were not exactly household names. None of them are considered locks to make the 53-man roster. If a wide receiver like Jameson Williams, one of the fastest players in the entire NFL, torches you deep, that's understandable. You tip your cap and move on. If Amon-Ra St. Brown, arguably the best route runner at the position in football, wins on a hitch, you nod and say that's just Amon-Ra being Amon-Ra. But when the name's beating you are players fighting for depth chart survival themselves, players most beat writers and analysts don't project to make the final roster at all, that is not a the receiver made a great play story. That is a something structural is going wrong story. And that's exactly what's happening with McCreary. Dig one layer deeper, and the real issue reveals itself. Reps. If you are consistently on the field at the same time as players fighting for the back end of the roster, that tells you which unit you're running with. It suggests McCreary isn't getting the first team snaps many of us assumed he'd have locked up heading into camp. Snaps that would have had him working against Detroit's top receivers and the offensive starting personnel. Instead, it increasingly looks like he's stuck rotating with the second and third string, which both reflects his slow start and reinforces it. Fewer high-level reps means less chance to show he belongs with the starters, which means fewer high-level reps the next day. It's the kind of downward spiral that can bury a training camp roster spot fast. Recent camp reports have made the trend impossible to ignore. Coaches have quietly shuffled in behind rookie safety turn nickel option Christian Izien whenever Izien is on the field, bumping McCreary down to work as a second-team outside corner opposite Khalil Dorsey, then kicking inside to nickel in sub-package looks. And in one of the more recent practices tracked by Lions media, McCreary was the man run through the end zone by a Detroit running back on a red zone touchdown, right in front of national NFL Network cameras that happened to be on site that day. It's the kind of moment that turns a quiet camp battle into a headline. Let's be clear about McCreary's resume, because it matters for context. Advanced metrics have generally graded him as good, sometimes very good, cornerback across his career, and he's coming off arguably his best professional season. In 2 of his 4 NFL seasons, he graded out as a legitimate starting caliber corner. He was drafted 35th overall out of Auburn, a program that consistently produces NFL-ready defensive backs. This is not a camp body. This is not a journeyman fighting for his 10th roster spot. This is a talented player having a genuinely bad stretch at the worst possible time. So now the question becomes, does he actually get cut? Let's look at the corner room as a whole, because that's where the real answer lives. The Lions typically carry 5 or 6 cornerbacks on the initial 53, similar to how they build out the wide receiver room. DJ Reed is the unquestioned CB1, the veteran anchor of the group. Ennis Rakestraw is considered a near lock, and by most camp accounts, he's been playing some of the best football of his young career, rotating with veteran Rocky Sin for time opposite Reed on the boundary. That's 2, arguably 3 players who are safely on a roster. Rookie Keith Abney, brought in through the draft, has earned strong early buzz and looks like a lock as well. That accounts for 4 spots. Which brings us back to McCreary. On paper, before camp started, you would have assumed he was rounding out that top group, likely as the primary nickel option. Instead, all the positive buzz out of camp seems to be flowing toward Nick Whiteside, a name that wasn't nearly as prominent in off-season projections, and toward the defensive coaching staff's growing comfort using Izzian in sub-packages at nickel. If that trend holds, McCreary risks getting squeezed out entirely, watching a spot he was practically penciled in for slip away to a player few people were talking about back in June. There's one more wrinkle that could decide McCreary's fate, and it has nothing to do with man coverage or route recognition. Special teams. In today's NFL, your 5th and 6th cornerback almost always has to double as a core special teams contributor because those roster spots are about total value, not just position-specific talent. McCreary has never been much of a special teams player in his career. By most accounts, the most defensive plus special teams snaps he's ever logged in a season sits somewhere in the low 80s. Compare that to someone like Khalil Dorsey, a proven gunner on coverage units, and you start to see the math working against McCreary. If you're not a top 4 cornerback and you're not contributing on special teams, you're an extremely difficult roster cut decision for Dan Campbell to avoid making. Is McCreary getting cut? Right now, the smart money still says no. His talent level and draft pedigree make him too valuable to simply release outright, and there's still time before the roster has to be finalized. But safe is no longer the right word to describe his situation. He's on the bubble, and bubbles have a way of popping fast in August. Now let's flip the script, because training camp isn't all bad news in Detroit. Far from it. While McCreary fights for his job, a handful of Lions across the roster are putting together the kind of camps that get fan bases genuinely excited for the season ahead. Start with the face of the defense, Aidan Hutchinson. By multiple accounts, he has been an absolute wrecking ball through padded practices, logging multiple sacks, a tackle for loss, and a barrage of pressures in a single practice alone. For a player working his way back from a serious leg injury, that kind of dominance is exactly what Lions fans have been praying to see. The hope with any major injury recovery, whether it's a torn ACL, a torn Achilles, or a broken leg, is that year 2 back is when an athlete looks fully restored, sometimes even better than before. If Hutchinson is already terrorizing blockers like this in camp, Detroit's pass rush might be even scarier than it was during his breakout campaign. At tight end, Jackson Meeks has become one of the more pleasant surprises of the summer. Reports have him adding roughly 25 pounds since last season, and he's translated that added mass into real improvement as a blocker, all while staying dangerous as a pass catcher. That two-way skill set matters enormously for a Lions offense that has been searching for more consistent receiving production out of the tight end room. Detroit needs more players who can threaten defenses down the seam. And if Meeks can be the next piece to click at that position after some previous experiments didn't pan out, that's a real bonus for Drew Petzing's offense. Then there's Jared Goff, and it's worth pausing here for a second because Goff does not always get talked about the way his play deserves. During one recent practice, a highlight reel touchdown grab from a fellow skill player understandably grabbed the headlines and the social media buzz. But rewatch the clip, and it becomes clear that catch only happened because of an absolutely perfect throw dropped over the shoulder with pinpoint timing. It's easy to forget just how remarkably accurate and steady Goff has become, and how impressively he's continued to command this offense no matter which coordinator is calling the plays. Steady, unspectacular excellence doesn't always trend online, but wins football games. On the defensive line, Ahmed Hassanein has been quietly building momentum in the big end role, and by most camp accounts, he is looking like a legitimate weapon. Watching him line up alongside a rejuvenated pass rush this preseason should be appointment viewing for Lions fans. Nearby, defensive tackle Tyler Lacey has become one of the feel-good stories of camp. After briefly stepping away from practice, he returned and has continued flashing the kind of disruptive ability that has people talking about just how far he's come from a year ago. One notable rep saw him blow past a blocker to force Goff into an incomplete throwaway, then bull rush a second-team guard back into the pocket minutes later. At linebacker, rookie Eric Hunter out of Morgan State has impressed evaluators with his raw athletic tools, even as questions remain about whether he can crack a crowded linebacker room. His likeliest path onto the 53, much like the corners fighting for depth spots, almost certainly runs through special teams. And don't sleep on Ennis Rakestraw. Beyond his strong camp reps at cornerback, he's reportedly been able to run stride for stride down the field with Jameson Williams, one of the fastest players in professional football, while still making a play on the ball. That is not an easy task for anybody, let alone a young corner working his way back from a lost 2025 season due to injury. If he can stay healthy, Rakestraw looks like one of the true breakout stories of this camp. At receiver, St. Brown continues to look like exactly what he's been for years now, the alpha of that room. In a camp full of storylines about Jameson Williams' speed and buzz, it's easy to overlook that St. Brown was reportedly nearly unstoppable in a recent practice as Goff's #1 target. Alongside him, Malik Cunningham and Alan McNeil have both drawn praise for their return to form, adding even more depth and juice to a Lions team that is stacking talented, competitive camp battles at nearly every level of the roster. That's the beauty of training camp in August. You get heartbreak and hope colliding in the same practice, sometimes in the very same rep. You get a bargain bin cornerback fighting for his roster spot on one field, and a former top pick who nearly missed all of last season looking like a burner on the very same field 20 minutes later. That mix of young players scrapping to make the roster and established stars building on what already works. That's exactly the kind of camp storyline Lions fans should want heading into a season with real Super Bowl expectations. So here's where we leave it. Keep an eye on that cornerback room, because Roger McCreary's next few practices could decide whether Detroit's smartest value signing of the offseason turns into one of its most surprising cuts. And keep watching everyone else mentioned here, because as preseason football approaches, roster spots are about to get a whole lot more real. What do you think? Does Roger McCreary survive final cuts? Or is his time in Honolulu Blue already numbered? Drop your prediction in the comments below. I want to hear it. If this video helped you make sense of everything going on at Lions training camp, do me a favor and smash that like button. It genuinely helps this channel grow. And if you're not subscribed yet, we are closing in on 1,000 subscribers here at Detroit Scope, and every single one of you watching right now can help us get there. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and I will see you in the next one. Go Lions!